The old gold mine has for many years attracted people struck by the gold fever. However, recent events have driven the miners away, leaving their loyal donkeys without work. What could be lurking in the tunnels, scaring everyone off? Are you brave enough to explore the undergrounds? Not only is there a mystical creature inside, but you might also encounter spiders and scorpions. Let's see what's hiding in the shadows. And with that intro, I will welcome you to today's habitat build. I hope that could help set the scene for the story I want to tell with this donkey habitat. I have for a long time considered to implement a Wild West like gold mine in the drylands, which is the zoo we are building for today. I've just never been sure which animal to tie in with it. So when we got the donkeys with the barnyard animal pack, I felt like the time had come. Especially since some of the scenery items were quite fitting for a western theme as well. And since the mine was one of the most important features of this build, this is also the part I started to make first. You might wonder why I seem to be building this in an otherwise empty part of the zoo. This habitat will later be integrated into the existing landscape of the park, but I also want to see if I could get a good blueprint out of it. Therefore I'm building it as a standalone build to begin with. I did it like this for two reasons. Overall, I just want to more often put stuff up on the workshop, and since my habitats often get very blended in with the surroundings, they tend not to be very easy to turn into good blueprints. So building this in an empty space made it a bit easier. On top of that, a lot of the inspiration for this build comes from Lego and Playmobil sets, as well as other models of gold mines, 3D models and so on. Therefore I wanted it to have a bit of the same feel to it. So I kinda wanted this build to look like a toy model you could put up on a shelf, if that makes sense. But when the habitat is done and saved as a blueprint, we'll then integrate this habitat into the park, where it will start off a bit of a thematic area within the North American area, which we will continue another day. So this flat rock part I'm working on here will be part of the donkey's habitat itself, so the donkeys will be able to walk up on top of the entrance into the mine, so you can get some fun views like that. Now we'll put up some of the last details for the entrance to the mine for now. We'll put up some signs as well as one of the big barnyard pieces, and then we'll also add some fencing on the top before we can start out the work for the inside of the mine. We are only starting it now, and then it will be finished up later. Part of the idea with the mine was also to house some of the desert exhibit species I still need to add to the North American area. So I managed to fit 2 exhibit boxes inside of the mine, which I covered up a large part of so it looks like small terrariums instead. This was quite easy to do for this build since I could just cover what should not be seen with rocks. I lost part of the recording for building the exhibits, so the first one you won't see me design here, but we will of course check it out later in the video. And that exhibit is for the Mexican red knee tarantula. The other exhibit is for the giant hairy desert scorpion, and I thought both the spider and the scorpion were quite fitting species for a kind of creepy gold mine setting like this. And here you can see how I'm turning this big exhibit box into 2 small terrariums, where there often will be a scorpion spawn visible. You can see I also made a bit more of progress on the outside now, and the donkeys have moved in, so I could better work around with their traversable area while I'm working on all of the rock work here to make sure they can still enter this small waste part up over on the top of the entrance to the mine. And since we're building for the donkeys today, we might now as well talk a bit about this inclusion to the game. I must admit the donkey was not an inclusion I needed at all, especially not in a pack already full of hoofstock that just continued the trend of animal packs being heavy on these types of animals. I honestly don't feel like this creature brings much to the table. Especially not since it really feels like some rather quick work from Frontier's side, not really much better than the old version of the Malayan tapir. It has taken me some time to get this video finished, so along the way update 1.17.1 showed up, and with it came the addition of a cross on the back of some of the donkey's skins. I'm really glad to see this inclusion, as it gives the donkey a bit more of uniqueness, and it was weird not having this being an option for our donkeys, as it seems like it's more common for donkeys to feature this cross than to be without. I think it has only been added to the brown donkey variants, while I think it was the grey versions that needed it the most. But maybe I just haven't discovered all the versions yet. Another fix for the donkey a lot of people hoped to see was some proper sounds for them. Donkeys got some very iconic sounds which most people are very familiar with, but right now the donkeys in Planet Zoo just sounds like horses. This is also the case with the Somali wild ass. It is really a shame, and all in all just makes it feel too lazy of an inclusion, if I'm being honest here. Part of the reason I'm a bit skeptical about using mods myself is that I have a hard time ignoring when animals doesn't make the right sounds. So it is very disappointing to get an official animal that reuse sound from other species they don't sound like. This really should be fixed by Frontier before support ends. That would only be fair for the paying customers. Paid for a donkey, not a horse dressed up like a donkey. But to get the most out of the content we get, I often like to try and come up with ideas for the inclusions I like the least. Finding use of an animal at least once helps to justify its inclusion a bit to me. And since I've for a long time considered doing something Wild West related in this zoo, the donkey seemed like the perfect way to get this started, since they're so often tied in with gold mines. With this build I also want to challenge myself a bit. Therefore I decided to not use any gridded wall sets for the stable and make it all custom instead. Quite a fun challenge, and since we're also going for a Wild West theme with this build, it helped to make it look a bit imperfect in the appearance, so it appears a bit more old. Not everything here had to be mirrored perfectly and so on. So while it's not a large building and somewhat simple, I really think it is one of the more unique stable designs I have done. I'm going with a lot of different wood textures here to just make it look like it has been put together with whatever the people who moved out here in this desert area could come up with. I guess you wouldn't have all that much wood around out here, and also to make it appear more used and more old and so on. The design of the stable is quite simple. There's just a small part for the donkeys to seek shelter, where you can also be feeding them. And then there's a small guest area, so the guests can go inside of the stable and get close to the donkeys if they are inside. Since these are domesticated animals, they're quite easy to be around for the keepers, so you won't need a whole lot of separations areas. And in case one of the animals does need to be moved for itself, it's also possible to quite easily move it around the zoo. Guess you could walk with them on a line or whatever you call it for a donkey. It wasn't necessary to build multiple enclosures and so on for this habitat. Had it been a wild animal of the same size, it would probably have been a different story. Now we're doing some more detailing inside of the mine, where I'm putting up a second tunnel entrance, but this time inside of the mine itself. But this entrance will be closed off with some wood pieces, so I want to make it look like somebody closed this off recently, just to make a bit of a story for the public when they go in here, and build up a bit of a setting, so it's not just an empty space you go into and look at animals and go out again. We want it to feel a bit scary, and to help that scary feeling we of course need to make this tunnel look dark, and then we need something creepy to be hiding inside of the darkness. So I found use of some of these glowing eye pieces from the Twilight pack that I was sure I would never end up using, but it just made a fun little cartoonish gimmick down here that there is some kind of a mystical creature inside. Then I'll let it up to people themselves to come up with what that creature is. I have no clue. And the mine of course also needs some minecarts, so that is what I'm starting to build here. You can see I've been detailing a bit more on the outside. I didn't include all of this in the video. I've skipped some of the less important things to not make this video too long. But here we're building the minecart, and we're also making a version of it with gold inside, and I think I might at some point upload these as blueprints of their own. I think they turned out quite nice. So if you're ever interested in building a mine of your own, you could be using these. And to make the gold pieces, I simply just put together some of the small forked rock pieces and went with a color that felt like a bit of a dusty gold. And with the minecarts done, we can also get back into the mine and finish up some more detailing in here, so it looks a bit more like some miners have been working in here recently and just left because of that scary thing. And when we're done detailing there, we'll also be doing a bit more of detailing in the stable, and then this habitat is done. For the most part it was done enough for me to turn it into a blueprint. It was a bit complicated to get done, so I had to move all the null barriers to a bigger area than what the donkeys are actually using, so I was sure every scenery piece got included with it. So if you end up using this, you might have to adjust the null barriers again to not have a lot of space that isn't really part of the habitat itself, but this was the only way I could really figure out how to save it all as a blueprint. I hope that makes sense. You might be able to sense it when I move it into the zoo, which you will see soon. And going forward, this western area got at least a few builds planned for it. So I have some train tracks laid out in this part of the zoo, and I need to build a train station for this, which of course will also be western themed. I don't know when I'll be doing that, but it will be done at some point. And I think most of the remaining animals for the North American area in the drylands will be integrated in this western area, maybe with a few exceptions. And I did one exception just a few days ago, exhibit build for the American bullfrog. It was a bit of a spontaneous idea, so it turned into a quick little building video you might have seen, or else you can go and watch it now. If you're interested in my exhibit builds, which we also included some of in this video, but we didn't really focus all that much on them, you could go and check out that bullfrog video. And just to explain that build a bit, you might wonder why I ended up with bullfrogs in a desert setting, but I did some research and it seems like bullfrogs have ended up in a bit of a desert, or at least semi-desert area, and they have become more or less invasive there, so I felt like there was a good story in that. And now we're just adding in some of the last details to the barn, at this little area for some hay and so, and then we will move on to turning this into a blueprint and moving it into the zoo. The blueprint is now ready, and we can go and see if we can find a good spot for it next to the train tracks. And then I'll just be adjusting the area around it a bit and also make a few adjustments to the habitat so it fits better into this part of the zoo. But as these adjustments were a bit all over the place, I didn't include a lot of it in the video now. Thank you for stopping by today, and make sure to subscribe to the channel to see how we continue the drylands at some point in the future, and make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. And now we'll go to some cinematic views of all we have done here today.